Let's talk about this even further with someone who was in the room, our friend, legal affairs journalist Meghann Cuniff. She joins me. Meghann, thanks for being with us. I was really just struck by how forthcoming Gascón was, that there is opposition, dissension in his own office about going forward with something like this. So much so that whoever opposes Gascón's moves here will fight it in court here. So what did you make of that? Why do you think he wanted to be so forthcoming about that very fact?
That's really what stood out to me too. I mean, I kind of said wow to myself when he was saying that at the press conference, but he must be just trying to prepare for what's coming, that there could be, sounds like, some pretty serious opposition. And what really surprised me at the press conference is he said, this is a decision that I just came to an hour ago. And the press conference started late. There was a lot of questions about what was going on. It just sounds like there was a lot of inter-office, behind-the-scenes politics going on. And other people have pointed out that he said that he just made that decision an hour ago, but the family had flown in from elsewhere, and they said that they had about 6 hours notice. So it's a little unclear what exactly was going on and what really the truth is on when he made this decision. But it sounds like he's just kind of steeling himself for perhaps some pretty fiery opposition from people within his own office who perhaps feel like they have more knowledge of the case than he does.
Yeah, Meghann, I thought that was so interesting because throughout the time that the case has gotten a new look, and I'm talking about the time in the media specifically, you have not heard any opposing voices, any public figures, anyone saying on the record, no, this should not happen. This case, this story does not need a new look here. But Gascón saying, those very people are in his own office. So I was struck by that. He also went out of his way, maybe not out of his way, but he acknowledged the fact that the family of the Menendez brothers did not get a heads up on this decision by his office that they were going to ask a judge for resentencing options here. I thought that was interesting because, to your point, we were waiting for it here on LiveNOW. It was an hour late, and it's somewhat intimated, and maybe you can prove me wrong if you have reporting on this, that if it is an hour late, maybe they needed to get their ducks in a row before they came out in front of the cameras here. Yes, it's been discussed for so long, but does that spell out that maybe there were behind-the-scenes moves and motions at the very last minute? Were they ready to come before the public with this?
It seemed like there definitely was a lot of maneuvering going on and a lot of last minute things going on because, like you said, the press conference started late. It just seemed like there were a lot of different factors going on behind the scenes that weren't being discussed publicly. But the assumption was from us all when we got the announcement, reporters that is, that this would be a recommendation for resentencing. Of course, the question is what exactly would the recommendation for resentencing be? But the idea that someone like George Gascón would hold a press conference, invite the family, and then announce that he was going against the family's wishes and not recommending resentencing. I mean, people just thought that that was pretty unfathomable. But George Gascón said that he just made the decision about an hour ago. So it just seemed there's a lot of intrigue here.
Yeah, Meghann, I wanted to ask too, because Gascón said these words, which really hinge on the whole thing, whether a court agrees. Yes. That is the question. And it's not guaranteed that a judge will agree with Gascón's recommendation. He acknowledged that as well. What is the thinking there, in your circles? What have you heard? It's not a sure bet, is it? Will Gascón get somewhat of a favorable judge to hear this? How is that going to play out? Because that's what makes or breaks this entire story, whether a court agrees.
Exactly. This needs to be signed off by a judge. This is just a recommendation. So a judge could reject it outright. The judge could decide to go with a different resentencing model. It's just hard to tell, but I think Gascón is really counting on his recommendation here. I think prosecutors' recommendation usually would hold a lot of weight, but one big elephant in the room that he acknowledged was the opposition within his own office. I think that could present the judge with something to consider there that isn't just a blanket recommendation from prosecutors saying, yes, resentence these guys, they deserve to be free. And I think a lot will depend on who are the people within the office who are opposed to this. Do any of them have direct involvement in the previous prosecution. It's been so many years that perhaps they don't, but it'll depend on how strongly they come out and also just what the judge thinks. But then, the attorneys have acknowledged and Gascón acknowledged that it then goes to the parole board, that the parole board, the California parole board, will be the ones to decide whether the Menendez brothers get released on parole. Given everything we've heard about their rehabilitation, everything that they're doing within the prison system, it sounds like they would be considered good candidates for parole. But there's still just so many steps between now and them actually seeing freedom.
Right, because right now, I mean, parole is not even on the table. They want to put it on the table with this recommendation.
The judge has to decide whether to make that an option, and then it's up to the parole board to set a hearing and go through the steps that they do there.
So, Meghann, I'm not a political pundit. You're not a political pundit, but there's an election in 12 days. George Gascón is up for re-election, and some have argued, some of his critics have said that he's only doing this to redound to his political benefit. If that is the case, how would it redound to his political benefit for re-election? And this was a really contentious moment in the press conference. I'm not entirely sure who that reporter was, but they were going back and forth about whether or not he's just doing this solely for his re-election prospects here. What did you make of that?
They were. I thought it was a legitimate question on the reporter's part. He has addressed that many times. I think he was frustrated that he was being asked that when he's addressed it at debates, at other press conferences. I was having that conversation with some other people at the press conference, and we just kind of concluded that we don't see definitively how this helps him get reelected. Kind of the thought around Los Angeles is this might have been the last press conference that we see with George Gascón, and there's no thought that the Menendez brothers have such a huge groundswell of public support that this is going to somehow sway the election his way. I think the Menendez brothers certainly have a lot of support, and there's the Netflix audience, but really that's a national audience of people who aren't voting in Los Angeles County elections, and I think there's also a number of people who might see this as a turnoff. The idea that this is just unequivocally a political move to gain votes, it's like, well, is this going to gain him a lot of votes? It's just kind of a question. And really, when you look at the petition and the support that the family support that they have, the lawyers that they have involved in this, it's certainly not an outlandish petition. I mean, it definitely has merit to it. It's not surprising that they would take this up. And the gap between it being filed and when he takes it up is actually pretty common if you look at habeas petitions. So again, it just goes to, I mean, is this going to sway the election for him? I don't think so.
Okay, because, frankly, and it seems like there is some skepticism there in Los Angeles. I was skeptical as well. Why would George Gascón, knowing all the criticism, all the heat he has faced as district attorney, why would he hinge his reelection prospects on whether or not Lyle or Erik Menendez go free? It just doesn't seem to be congruent.
Yeah. I think to try to chalk this up as just a purely political move by him, it is wrong because it's so nuanced. And really, there could be some thought to the fact that he honestly believes in this cause, and he's always been outspoken about wanting to be an advocate for sexual abuse victims. He's made that kind of a cornerstone of his administration. So he might genuinely believe in this cause and just feel like it's the right thing to do.
All right, MeghannCuniff, we're going to have to leave it at that. I always appreciate your reporting and your insight. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.